Good evening, Westchester Area School District parents. We're really glad you could join us tonight. This is one of our first parent workshops for this school year. This is the fourth year we're doing this. And we have a special guest. Dr. Bernstein is going to review with you how you can support your child emotionally and academic in this virtual world. He is going to spend about 40 minutes going over really good, solid tips and ideas, and then about 15 minutes. For 15 minutes, he is going to answer the questions. So if you have questions, don't forget to put that in the link when you push on the link. So let's get started, Dr. Jeff.
Thank you so much, Carol, and Mary Beth. Thanks for being in the background, helping me on the technical side. I've done one of these conferences in the spring, and somehow my Zoom video, I didn't see myself, but it seemed to work out. So we can make it through that. And, you know, that's a good segue because it was last March, April. I think I did a conference in April for the district, and I'm very honored to be back. So thank you for that. And at that point, you know, we were all kind of in the beginning stages of wading through this online learning and just the societal changes and the shelter in place. And so here we are 7 months later. And, you know, it's just a lot of information that people are taking in still and trying to make sense of. And I would have liked to think that we'd all feel a little more settled in, but I know there's different views that certain parents have on methods of learning, and we're not going to try to get involved in kind of taking sides on anything tonight. What I'm here to do is say what I think is going to be helpful, to share my ideas. I will tell you that I've been talking to a lot of parents over the last few months and children that are doing online learning and some that have gone back to school, and it's just very challenging. I know we all know this, but I think we need to really keep in mind what extenuating circumstances we're facing. So let me tell a little bit about myself. I'm a psychologist. I've been in practice for about 32 years now. I work with children, I work with teens, and a lot of parents. I've seen a whole lot of things over 33 years. I like to say I know less now. Years ago, I knew all the answers, or so I thought I did. I've written some books. Some of those are on the banner for the talk tonight. And I joke that all of my books came from my own pain. So I happen to have anxiety issues that I battle. I have ADHD. I have dyslexia. So I've had to really learn through life how to cope, and I still do it. And I like to think that the two skills, you know, that we need to know really to help us survive in this world. I'm curious, I could do a poll right now if we had the time, like, hey, what are the two skills that we all really need to learn and really coach our children to learn? Because I think if we have a framework of like what our kids really need, what our teens need, it really helps us as parents orient ourselves on supporting children emotionally and academically. So if anybody's in suspense, I'll end it soon. STEM skills are important. Communication skills are important. Writing skills are important. Listening skills are important. But when I step back and I ask myself, from all the years I've been working with families, children and teens, what are the two most crucial skills as I see it? It always, for me, comes down to two things: the ability to calm down and the ability to solve problems. Because if those are not in place, then emotional adjustment and certainly academics are going to be very challenging, as well as other demands of life. So I want to start with that in mind. And I want to start by talking about how we need to be really tuned in to our children's emotions, particularly in this time where it's just such extenuating circumstances. I've used that word a few times because it's a once in a century event, like this kind of pandemic, and it's global and so much going on. And we need, even if it wasn't a pandemic, to always be cognizant of how our children and teens are doing emotionally. Now, I like the hand model of the brain. I think it makes for a really good share. It's concrete, and I'm just going to go over it very briefly. Again, for anybody who's seen my talks before, I think it's a really good thing to keep in mind for anybody first seeing this. It's good to know as well. So I'm going to show you right now that if you can imagine that this is my head right here, and here's my head. And right here at the bottom, right here, the back of my head, is the cerebellum. It controls blood flow, heart rate, and breathing, okay? This part keeps us alive, right back here. In the middle part, right here, right where my thumb is, okay, is the amygdala, and what's housing that is the limbic system. All you really need to remember is that this is somehow the screen changed, but I got it. I'm going with it here. This is my reacting brain. And right here is my thinking brain. So the bottom line is thinking brain here, reacting brain here. Okay, now, what happens when a lot of times children and teens, all of us, get upset when we're struggling, when we're stressed out. Now, keep in mind, stress usually comes from things we don't expect. You know, if you think about a lot of anxiety that underlies stress, it's like, what if this happens? What if that happens? When our amygdala, when this reactive side of our brain gets hyper aroused, it pushes up, and our thinking brain goes offline. It's like flipping your lid. Dan Siegel does a nice job of presenting this model on YouTube, Dan Siegel, and I have a version of it in the Anxiety, Depression, and Anger Toolbox for Teens, my latest book. And this is really helpful kind of graphic to keep in mind because you can see really how it happens. Now, for so many of us, this amygdala part, these driven thoughts here, again, they can be what if thoughts, they can be should thoughts, they're thoughts about fairness. It's when the emotions overrun and the thinking brain goes offline. And that's why you'll often try to say to a child or a teen especially, because remember, their brain does not fully form until the age of 25, mid-20s. I'm still waiting for mine, and I'm looking at 60, but here's the thing. We want to try to bring this thinking brain in to manage the reacting brain. But a lot of times when we're so stressed out, it's just very hard to access our thoughts. And people will say, I got so upset. I couldn't think straight. I don't know what came over me. You've seen kids with tantrums and shutting down and silent treatment. All that comes from an overactive amygdala that's pushing the logic brain offline. So how do we help our kids manage their amygdalas, that reacting brain, right? Well, one thing that's very important is that when we engage children and teens, we have to create an emotional climate. Yes, you want to have the room set up or the space where the child's going to do the work and good lighting. All that's really important in a nice space, but we need to make sure that the emotional space is good. Parents that I see that are struggling with anxiety themselves, and many of us do because we want our kids to be in the best position to set them up for success. We all know that, but really making sure that when we talk to children, you lead number one with empathy. You say to them, for example, I see that there's a lot of that's new right now, or gosh, I imagine it really is hard to sit through this day. What can I do to help you? Versus, did you get this set up yet? Did you turn that in? Did you see that email? Okay, we've got the asynchronous part we've got to catch up on. All those are important, but you really want to control it. What I'm trying to say, manage your own anxiety, parents. We all have it, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. Okay, I'm not asking you to become a Woody Allen-like character that's just going to 24 hours a day be neurotic and, you know, asking your children for reassurance. It's not about that. It's about being human and creating that empathetic bond and letting them know, hey, there's a lot we're going to work on adjusting to this year. Let's have a growth mindset. Let's have a growth mindset where we're learning and growing and seeing what works and what could work better. And that, by the way, is a really good lead-in to having, and here's a phrase that I'd really encourage you to keep using with your children. Let's have a constructive conversation and model that. And one way to model that is to ask your child, hey, what do you think's what do you think's working so far with a couple of weeks of classes, and what could be going better? And what am I doing that's helpful, and what can I be doing better? So really encouraging that emotional space for learning, because the emotional health helps the academic health. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to cover. Now, again, let me just go over a couple practical exercises. We talk about taking deep breaths, and we say, well, okay, deep breaths are important, but why? Why do deep breaths help? By the way, if you're going to try to encourage your child to kind of breathe and calm down when they're stressed out, do it with them. Don't just ask them to do it. And when you take the deep breaths, what's really cool is that diaphragmatic breathing, not like this, not like where you're breathing out here, where your chest is coming out, but you want to really have one. I like to show one hand here and one here. And so when I breathe in, I'm exaggerating a bit, but I go slowly. Feel that beach ball, the physiology of breathing and the link to managing the amygdala. It's a very important one. When you breathe in, when you focus on the breath, it's a present moment focus. It's not about what if, or I hate this, or I can't do this. It's about getting in touch with the here and now. So it's a good exercise for us to do as parents and model that for our children and teach them when they're open to it, maybe not in the middle of being stressed out over their online Zoom learning or whatever the equivalent of the school uses for virtual learning, but really planting the seeds of learning how to relax and quiet their minds, quiet their amygdalas. And that when you do that, when you do those deep breaths, it stimulates the vagus nerve, this is the theory, and sends a signal to help reboot the reactive brain, the limbic system. Number two, when you do the deep breathing, you're focusing on the here and now. And when you focus on the here and now, again, as I started to say, you're not focusing on all the what ifs and I hate this and I can't and I don't want to do this and you made me do this and that's not fair. Okay, now not all kids are going to buy into something like that. I get it. So just coaching children to count to 10 sometimes, or count backwards, or make it playful. Hey, I'm going to try to count backwards from 10. Why don't you try it too? Maybe you don't want to try it. That's okay. Let me try it right now. Because you know what, Joey or Sarah, I'm getting frustrated. That's not going to help you. And that's not going to help me. It's not going to help us. So the more that you can continue to be a model, an emotion coach when you feel stuck as a parent is very important. Okay, I give this metaphor a lot. It's like a pace car, Indianapolis 500. I don't follow racing much, but I know there's a pace car that starts to race. Your job to foster solid emotional health and create an emotional health environment conducive to a favorable learning environment is to keep your pace car not accelerating. Because if you rev up, I said to do this, how many times do I have to tell you? When are you going to get this done? If you don't do it now, I understand, by the way, all those concerns. But when children do not think about when you're stressed out. Do you really want to learn? I know when I'm stressed out, the last thing I want to do is try to learn something new. But we have to remember that. That's one of my biggest points tonight. Remember the emotional climate. Remember the emotional reactivity, be mindful of it, and that when children can talk about things, when they feel safe to talk about it, they can name it to tame it. Name it with their thinking brain to tame it. If they're shut down, you don't want to pressure them because they're feeling all sorts of pressure. You just want to say, I think when you're ready, it'll be great to talk about this. I'm not going to force you. That's not good for you. It's not good for me. And there's just something about that slowing down your pace car. Because when you accelerate, when you raise your voice, when you get demanding, when you pull out the harsh consequences, you start going faster and faster around that track. pace car, that you're trying to get ahead of the kid is going faster, you're going faster, and somebody hits the wall. It's a crash and burn. It doesn't work. So again, you want to try to manage your child's emotions by using different skills, deep breathing, counting to 10, taking a break, exercise, shoot baskets. These are very important things to be aware of. Remember that your children are children. I can't emphasize this enough. I mean, we tend to forget, again, that their brains have not fully matured yet to manage emotion. Look at road rage. Look at the way some people have been in terms of what's going on in our world right now. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of just a lot going on. We want to try to remember that developmentally, they still need to learn to calm down and problem solve. And again, when you engage them, try to use language that's not going to feel commanding and reactive. Be calm, firm, and non-controlling. I'll give a quick story. I've given this before. Because again, the books I've written, they all come from my own struggles and those of my clients. My kids were, I want to say, 7, 9, and 11, and they're much older now. And one time they were getting into the car, and Sam, my son, goes and shoves my daughter, Gabby, the younger one. She's 7, he's 9. And so my older daughter, Alyssa, is trying to be the mediator, and she's saying, Dad, you can't even handle your own kids. That's how she was trying to intervene. And you have anger issues, because I was like, Sam, you get in the car right now. You will apologize to her. It was chaos. And what happened was, when that happened, that was a pivotal moment for me, because I had been a consequence ravenous parent. I mean, I was super into timeout, and I think timeouts have a place. I think discipline has a place. Disciple to teach. Punishment is present something negative or take away something pleasurable. It may teach, it may not teach. But when you have a constructive conversation, when you can quiet down that amygdala, when you can be an emotion coach and engage in a way that is calm, firm, and non-controlling, and you avoid those fruitless power struggles, that is going to set your child up for skills throughout their life, to be able to talk things out, to be able to use their thinking brain to manage their reacting brain. Very important. So what happened with Sam, by the way? So he gets in the back seat, and I said, you will apologize to your sister right now. And he, like a well-adjusted 9-year-old, looks at me and says, make me. And back in the old days, I used to live up in the sticks, a rural part behind Glenmore. And I had this fantasy of just, I will admit this, every time I tell this story, taking him out to a cornfield and teaching him a lesson, put it that way. Of course, now he's a power lifter. He squats tremendous amounts of weight. So I'm glad that I always took it on a higher road with him. But I hadn't. That was the thing. I had at one point lost it and started to wash his mouth off with self. I'm keeping it real. I had all sorts of frustrations and anger. And that day when he said, make me, I looked at him and I said, Sam, there's a part of me that wants to try to make you, but you know what? That's not going to help you. It's not going to help me. So I'm asking you, please, to apologize to your sister. I know you're better than this. I can't make you. Calm, firm, discipline, disciple, to teach, and non-controlling. And then, of course, my oldest in the front seat, Alyssa, age 11, is that all you're going to do, Dad? But then about 5 minutes later after driving, I hear from the back seat, fine, sorry, Gabby. I said, Sam, not as remorseful as I would have liked, but thank you. Later, a couple days later, the youngest, Gabby, 7, walks up to him, starts provoking him. He cocks a fist. And I said, Sam, and he let it go, putting positive differences to work. Hey, Sam, I got to give it to you. Gabby was really trying to get under your skin, and you really showed an ability to let that go. Thank you. Putting positive differences to work. We tend to forget that as parents. We get so beleaguered trying to prompt our kids, especially now for so many parents that are relegated into the role of being assistant teachers, academic coaches, enforcers, that it's easy to forget to try to look for the positive behaviors and put them to work. It's like if you go out today and you buy a used or new Toyota Camry, blue. What are you going to start to see on the road tomorrow? Toyota Camrys, blue. Why? Selective attention. It's top of mind. When we create a climate where kids feel so reactive, when we're pointing out so frequently where they're falling down, where they're falling short, it gets in the way of them being able to really feel good, because they're wondering when the next stressor is going to come. Your pace car is revving up and they're going fast. So you really want to try to put positive differences to work. Be the blue Toyota Camry, be the positive exception to the rule, and point those out. Okay, let me see here. What else can I cover? We talked about the coaching mindset. We want to try to limit shoulding. You know, you should have gotten this done. You should do this, because that's going to create a lot of pressure. So you want to avoid pressuring speech. And you want to reinforce strengths. I think that's the other part, is we want to model optimism. We want to show flexibility. For example, some kids may do better doing their asynchronous. I know the vocabulary now a lot better, right? Asynchronous versus synchronous learning. They may do better with their assignments that they have to do on their own at a certain point of the day. They may be hangry and not able to do it right away after school. They may need a break. I think we're still trying to figure out with attention what kids are capable of, when they're going to be at their best. Again, learning and growing. What do you think's working for you? What could work better? Really kind of having that open-minded way of looking at what's going to be best for your child, and realizing it may evolve over the course of the school year. We'll have to see. Okay. And the other part that I think is really important is modeling gratitude. Right now, everybody, at least most people, feel pretty stretched thin, multiple demands. Teaching your children about gratitude, letting them know what you're grateful for about them. I'm sure you all do this. It's just easy to forget it. Doing a gratitude jar. That's another way of creating mindfulness in the present moment. It quiets the reacting brain, that amygdala. It allows kids to feel safer to talk about things once you talk about the things that we're grateful for. Hey, you know, we're so grateful that we're okay and we're healthy. Hopefully you are. You know, we're grateful that we still have our home. Hopefully you do. You know, everything that you can share. I see some kids looking at me and waving, so I'm, thank you. So, you know, you really want to try to, I'll ask everybody to please turn cameras off, just because I have some faces looking at me. Thank you so much. So we really want to try to be grateful. Okay, some sound bites to help kids as the parents. I want to give you some concrete sound bites. I gave you one from that power struggle that time with my son. If a child is really kind of pointing out that you're getting frustrated, you know, the homework has to be done, the asynchronous work has to be done. He's not starting, she's not starting, there's procrastination, not signing in the morning on the, you know, virtual learning, any of that stuff going on. And you start to lose it as a parent. Make it a coachable moment. Example, and by the way, these all come from really the work, at the risk of plugging myself too much, 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child, second edition. That's where I get a lot of this from. I wrote it. Yes, you're right. I'm yelling right now. That's not going to help either of us. I apologize. Let me collect myself and let's try to discuss this calmly in a few minutes. Now, some of you might be looking at me and want to throw something through the computer at me. Like, come on, Dr. Jeff, you know, we're a dual career couple. I'm a single mom. I'm a single dad. You know, come on with all this warm, sunshiny stuff. You know, this kid I hear you. And that's why I tell my story. That's why I tell my story about when I used to scream at my kids, when I was overreactive. But again, calm, firm, non-controlling, using problem-solving language, modeling your own self-care, taking care of yourself, not having an emotional temper tantrum in front of your kids. It's very hard to expect them to regulate their emotions when you're not regulating your own, okay? Another one, I hear that's how you see it. For example, this schoolwork is stupid. Why do I have to do this? I hate this. I hear you. I see it differently. It's going to help us if we can agree to disagree. Let's try something else right now, and maybe we can come back to it. Another one. I see that you're very frustrated. By the way, these handouts were available. I believe they're on the site. I can check with Mary Beth after, but I believe they're accessible through the site. I made up 2 of these handouts. I can see you're frustrated. Just know I'm here to talk whenever you'd like to. And then sometimes getting innovative, a text message to your child if he or she is old enough to have a phone. You know, I'm really here to help you. I like how you just tried to do that, even though you didn't want to get it done. We got it done. That's really cool. Random reinforcement is really important. You don't want to do bribery, guys and women, people, all of you, they, use the right pronouns here. You don't want to use, being all inclusive, you don't want to really use bribery. If you get this done, then I'll do this for you. I mean, you can, and some kids respond to it, but I think it's much better to give random reinforcement. When you never know when you're going to get praised, it's very reinforcing, or when you're going to get the reward. Okay, I just wanted to give you this to go get some, you know, music on Spotify, or, hey, you know, I got you this puzzle, or, hey, you know, you can have a little more time with this video game. Random reinforcement. I caught you keeping your cool. I caught you sitting through this. Let's turn this a little academic. I'm just going quickly because I want to allow time for questions, but here's some positive exceptions to the rule. You know, your child listens to the teacher's online presentation for an age adjusted, 5 minutes straight, 15 minutes straight, a little longer than you usually see. So you'd certainly want to reinforce that. Your child gets halfway through the asynchronous math packet and does even a few more problems. It's an exception to the rule. You want to catch that. You can even do, like what I call positive catch book, especially with younger children, up to age 7 or 8, sometimes 9, they'll buy in, where they decorate the front of the book, Star Wars theme or dinosaurs theme or superhero theme or whatever they're into. And then you put these positive catches. You write down, hey, I caught you doing this really well. And then you review it with them when you're lying down next to them at night or a couple times a week. So I caught you, we talked about taking some deep breaths. Okay, you tried it, you didn't like it, but hey, thanks for trying. Or you didn't want to go, you know, help me walk the dog, but then later you asked if you could do that anyway. You know, whatever it is. Your child follows instructions for an assignment without asking you to repeat them. That would be a good one to reinforce. Your child remembers all the materials needed for a project and gets them ahead of time proactively. Another blue Toyota Camry, I'm not partial to any of these cars. I'm just saying whatever the car is, Nissan, a Ford, it doesn't matter. Make that car that you just bought that's top of mind the same selective attention dynamic for them by reinforcing these appropriate catches. Your child moves to a different work area to get rid of distractions, or says, I need a break, and then comes back and does their work. Does a good getting off of transition from a video game, better than usual. Doesn't pester you as much. Reinforce it, reinforce it. Your child puts on headphones without a reminder to focus better in class, whether it's Zoom or, you know, on Zoom probably. So you want to try to keep track of these focus wins, these times where kids are really doing a good job, and put it in the positive catch book. Older kids maybe do an accomplishment box or an accomplishment list. Most important way you're going to get their buy-in is let them know that you're struggling at times with them. You're all trying to figure it out and learn and grow. I'd like to stop and take some questions, and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay, and one of our nice participants did put in the chat window the link for where your handouts were placed on our website.
Okay, good.
So that you know that.
Thank you.
So if you're ready for a few questions,
I'm ready.
I have got them for you.
Let's roll.
All right, how should we handle meltdowns? How should we handle meltdowns better due to the increased virtual world? I am
Right.
noticing that they are increasing as the iPad time increases.
Right. Well, one thing that really is valuable is getting outside. And it's really helpful to, I find every day when I get outside, and I'm doing about 4 days a week on Zoom, and I am going in 1 day a week in the office. I have some people that really want to be seen in the office. But on the days that I'm on Zoom, and it's a lot of Zooming, I've just been really busy. I still try to get outside. So really trying to encourage a child to change it up and get outside, I think can help really kind of calm and quiet them. If they don't want to, if they want to be left alone, if they're melting down, let them have space, okay? And then just say to them, if and when you're ready, I'm here to help talk about this. Lead with listening. When they're reactive, don't burden them. We all know what it's like to have an argument with a spouse or a partner or somebody who keeps bringing things up when we don't feel good, when we're worked up. So try to keep this motto in mind when your kid is having a meltdown. This amygdala, realize, that when this amygdala gets reactive, it's like trying to reason with somebody who's intoxicated. That thinking brain is just not accessible. So, listen to what's going on, try to lead with empathy, reinforce to them when they do re-regulate that you value it, try to create emotional safety by making yourself stay calm. That's going to be one of the best ways to manage any kind of meltdown, I think. Again, think of that pace car at Indianapolis. Do not accelerate, and give them space. And then have them talk it out afterwards. I mean, you can't go, there's nobody ever complains that they took too much time to talk out what's bothering them, especially when you can get a kid to do that. And the best way you do that is you give them space if they need it.
Okay, thank you. Next question is what are the questions to ask, or what should we say to create an environment where my children are comfortable speaking openly and honestly to me and my wife?
Well, I assume the question might be about like if they're behind in school, because I just had something this week. I had another kid this week who he's got ADHD, and he had impulsively said some things. He used a word that wasn't appropriate, and there's a whole social disconnect, and he's really feeling it with a peer, and he's afraid to tell his parents. And I certainly see so many kids that are afraid to tell their parents. So I think one thing to say is, listen, we're all learning and growing. We don't expect you to be perfect. A lot of times parents, they'll say to their kids, didn't we tell you, we don't expect you to get A's. We just expect you to give it your best. I can't tell you how many times I hear parents say that. How many times I've probably said that to my kids. And you know what? Do we always give it our best? I mean, it sounds good. It's certainly wonderful to strive for. But I think sometimes a really good question is, what do you think is getting in the way of giving it your best? So I think we need to make sure that we're not judgmental, and we need to let our kids know that whatever they say, we're not going to hammer them. A lot of times we say, oh, you can tell me anything, and then we get reactive. I used to do that with my kids. So you may want to say, there's a part of me right now that's feeling a little anxious. I know that you didn't get this done, and there's a part of me that really wants to push you, but let's slow down. Let's look at what's working here. Maybe you feel I'm pressuring you too much. Maybe it's not quiet enough where you're working. Maybe you'd like a little more activity. You want to try doing your work in the kitchen. So again, I'm coming back to this question about how do we manage meltdowns, but let's say that the trigger is schoolwork, which is right now on all kids' plates. So trying to make sure that they have a good, conducive learning environment that's going to work for them, and realizing that what you may think works may not work for them. They may like a lot of little activity. For younger kids, maybe, I see a lot of kids that are fidgeting and moving. They sell on Amazon these fidget seats. They have fidget devices. I've got all sorts of balls here that I throw back and forth in the office, but I also ask kids questions, but they're good to sometimes squeeze. Things like that, giving kids little distractions, things to kind of, for younger children, and then for older kids to just keep talking it out and let them know about times that you've had meltdowns and how it feels for you and how you don't like it. May be relatable.
Okay, thank you. I do want to remind our folks that in the chat is the link for everyone to sign in, and you can also put your questions in there for us. This one is one I'm sure many are struggling with. I'd love some tips on how to define my role as a mom versus teacher and nag, as I seem to be damaging the overall parent-child relationship now that these roles are blending together.
Well, first of all, whoever asked this question, what insight you have. I mean, the fact that you're even trying to balance these concomitant roles at the same time, being, the coach, being the teacher, and being the parent. And I think asking your kids, hey, what's working and what's not working when I'm trying to help you with your schoolwork? And if they say, which a lot of kids do, I don't know, then you say, how about I throw some wet spaghetti on the refrigerator? It's a metaphor. and let's see what sticks. So for example, does it feel good when I remind you that you have something due tomorrow, or would you like to first come to me? Would it feel good if instead of my reminding you, I'm looking right now, I'm not texting a friend, by the way, I'm on this. But one thing you can do is try to make it a game. For a lot of kids, especially kids who have like ADHD, learning issues, it's always that initiation of activity. It's that getting started. For so many kids, school seems, it's called, in their mind, it's forced learning. It's a non-preferred activity. Making a game of it, saying, look, I want to be hands-off. Would you agree that you want to try starting on your work for 10 minutes, And so you make a timer, you make it a game, or they say 15 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it takes. So you try to kind of experiment with different strategies. And then again, I can't stress upon you enough. I went through a bunch of these, your child listens to the teacher's online presentation longer than usual. You praise it. You slide a note under their door. You send them a text message, whatever. You say, let's go outside and take a walk together. Halfway through the math packet, unprompted. Look for those positive exceptions to the rule. Cross-fertilize. Take one area where it's not working so well and strengthen it by linking success to the other. Let them know you can do this. And then empathizing, keeping it real. I mean, would any of you out there as parents really want to be going through this right now? I'm glad that I don't have to do Zoom classes, what I'm calling Zoom classes, virtual classes. Sometimes we feel like we can't really let our kids know what we really think. We need to be these amazing models who are impervious to stress and frustration and cynicism and shutting down, and tell them of times that you maybe haven't been as motivated. So, but the main thing you want to do is try to activate them and have them feel good about the work they're doing, and encourage them. Just be really gentle and reassuring. I think you'll get a lot further than being demanding. And again, thank yourself for being cognizant of trying to manage the role of being a parent, a teacher, an enforcer, a coach. Err on the side of being a coach, and that's what I've been trying to model today by the sound bites that are on the handout, really trying to let them know that you see where they're coping and validate that.
Thank you. This parent is asking, is it realistic for a parent to academically support a student who is taking 4 AP classes? He didn't seem to struggle in the spring. My focus has been on my older son, who seems to need more support from me. Is it okay to support children based on what they appear to need from their parents?
I love it. Now, the biggest thing you want to do is try to partner with your kid. Listen, hey, I'm here to help you. Like, I think it's so much better if a kid comes up to their parent, and you're probably all looking at me like, what planet am I on? But I coach. This is what I do. I coach a lot of kids to be able to ask for help. Being able to ask for help. I know that's not the exact, to answer the question, yes, I think it's fine for a parent to help a child, even a child who's working on their AP. I mean, are there adult children who have businesses where their parents help them? Sure they do. How is that any different? But I think it's really important that the child, teen, be as much in charge as possible as asking for the help, okay, of wanting to be on board getting the help. So the more they can own it, that's really important. You know, we have one, Washington Post last year, 1/3 of kids that go to college, freshmen, do not advance to sophomore year. I heard this on NPR. I read it in the Washington Post. I've seen it in a couple of different, so now they may eventually complete college, okay? But it takes them a while. And I think we need to teach our children, the point I'm making is this, how to ask for help, how to accept help. But we don't want to be micromanaging. And I see a lot of parents that their anxiety gets the best of them and they start micromanaging. Name it. If you're feeling anxious about their course load, ask them if you can partner with them if they'd like it, how they would want it to look. Would they want to check in that night? Would they want to check in the morning before? Would they, you know, could you have a working understanding about how much they're on video games or doing other preferred activities versus non-preferred activities? Make it a conversation, a constructive conversation. That's what you're going for. That's what we need to teach our kids to do, especially in this day and age. Don't get me started, where we're texting and we're doing a lot of sound bites and we're doing abbreviated stuff and a lot of, you know, I see so many emotionally constipated children and teens like, you know, we know that if you're emotionally constipated, you're then on the bottle it up and explode plan or implode plan. It doesn't work out that well. Have a constructive conversation.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What would you recommend for a child who needs that time to calm down and get into their quiet place, but also keep them on track with their virtual learning and teacher expectations of being on the screen and engaged?
Yeah, I would empathize about how hard it is for you sometimes. Like you like time to chill out, you as the parent, like, hey, I know, again, I keep coming back to that empathetic, relatable bond, which then puts you in a much better position to be their coach versus their parent who is telling them what to do. I'm all over authority. I like consequences. I like accountability. I'm not anti-consequences. But when you are pressuring, when you are nagging, when you are taking things away and there is an inflamed amygdala and this thinking brain is offline, it's not going to work. So maybe just empathize. Hey, listen, have that learning and growing model. What do you think would work for the first week? Or, you know, I don't think this is working. Would you agree? No, Mom, it's fine. I'm okay. Well, there's a part of me that wants to believe you're okay, but I just got a note. And, you know, I don't want to be in this position of the enforcer. Help me not be. And again, these are not just one conversation. These are kind of ongoing conversations. Don't expect to quote unquote fix it. You know, don't expect to just make the one answer. You may hit a home run. Okay, we're going to agree that when you come home, you get an hour to decompress before we even think about school, or 3 hours, or you start your schoolwork at 7, or we do it right when you get home. We take a big chunk. Have that. We're in this together. Let's see what works mindset. Hey, this doesn't seem to be working. Here's why I think it's not. What do you think? Collaborative conversation so that it can be revisited, and then reinforce them in real time. You know what? This is usually a pretty difficult thing to talk about, and we're talking. Hey, I appreciate it. I like that we're able to sit down and talk about it, because I have a sense right now you'd rather be playing Fortnite. And if I was you, I might rather be doing that too. So there you go. That's how I would be trying to present it.
Okay, so now we have a question from a parent of a first grader. It says, my first grader is doing very well academically, but she's very sad to not be going to school. She's like depressed. We are very close. Our family is very loving. She has siblings to play with. I'm home with them and do not work, but I can see her genuine sadness. How can I help her?
First of all, to the mother, to this question, asking the question, you're not gainfully employed, but you're working because you're a mom.
Correct.
So there we go there. First of all, if the child is showing the sadness and willing to talk about it, I think that's huge. I mean, it's an appropriate response right now. There's a lot of loss. I joke with a lot of the kids, and every week I'm talking to many children and teens, and it's like I say, so do you remember back when you were hoping there was a snow day and you just didn't want to go in and you waited for the announcement? And, you know, did you ever think that you'd be saying, I want to be in school. I'd rather be in school than be at home. So the fact that the child, in this case, I need to get a little more serious, is sad and hopefully willing to talk about it and verbalizing it, I would just make that an area of discussion. I would really empathize, like, hey, yeah, I understand. Now, it gets touchy. I know some people have been, families have been very tightly quarantined. I've seen a lot of families where, you know, they can make play dates with families that they feel are also quarantined. I know people on the other extreme. I've seen it all. I won't say I've seen it all, but I've seen varied views on social contact. But the idea that the child is feeling some sadness, even though they have siblings and a warm, supportive family, makes sense. I would validate that. I wouldn't think of it as anything bad. It's an appropriate reaction. It's loss. And again, maybe there's some groups, maybe there's some new activities, just getting outside, but also acknowledging this is a sad time for a lot of people. But then again, you know, I've seen kids do things like starting charities and, you know, joining certain charities and starting new causes or doing some crafts and kind of channeling their sadness or their anxiety into new directions. So it's always cool to try to learn new things. And also to remind our kids this isn't going to last forever. Now, kids have a harder time with time, you know, than we as adults. But I don't think that message hurts, especially now that we've been in this for 7 months-ish. And that hopefully, again, I know there's a lot of different political beliefs out there, and I'm trying to stay neutral, but I'd like to think that with a vaccine or better treatment, certainly, you know, as we get further along in this school year, things are going to get better. And I think we need to have a voice of optimism for our kids as well, but validate the sadness about these real losses.
Okay. Thank you. Can you give us some tips on how to handle perfectionism right now?
Sure. Well, you know, I think right now, first of all, it's always a problem. It is. I mean, I think there's a nobility that a lot of, it's like a noble feeling, like, you know, you think back to people going on a job interview and, you know, so what's your weakness? Well, my weakness is I'm a perfectionist and I just, you know, I don't know if you'd want to hire me. I mean, I'm super conscientious to the point that I just can't let things go until I know that, you know, I mean, it's seen in our culture as a very appealing trait, you know, being a perfectionist, but I've also seen a lot of kids burn out in middle school, and then in high school they're burned, or be strong perfectionists, then burn out in college. There's some who are able to be perfectionists right on through, but it takes a toll. And I would be talking about, you know, that caring about your school, because often what goes with being a perfectionist is worrying and anxiety. And what I would try to do is reframe caring and being invested versus worrying, that you can care about your schoolwork and you can do self-care too. Taking time for yourself, not being so hard on yourself. I would introduce the concept of self-compassion, which is it's a concept that's gaining traction. I mentioned it in my books and in my work. It originated from Kristen Neff at University of Texas at Austin. The idea that, hey, you know what, when we're compassionate with ourselves, when we give ourselves a break, when we have a disappointment, it may mean this kid's gotten an 85 or an 82 instead of a 98 or a 70. on a project, talking about resiliency and grit, that handling setbacks is part of life and good, and sharing times where you were perfectionistic and how it got in your way, and realizing again, it's okay to care, but when it goes on the point of obsession, that's something that we're artificially putting in, often because we have this overarching belief thinking we have to be perfect. You know, I always say the only perfect people, my best friends since kindergarten said this, are in the cemetery. I mean, whenever you go to a funeral, that's when you hear somebody's perfect. And you can even say that, no disrespect to the deceased, but when we're alive, we all have struggles. And part of, you know, remember the beginning of this talk, what do I think the two top skills for life are? Calming down and solving problems. So we're kind of back to that.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more question. Are you noticing increased depression with teenagers, and what can parents do if their children are showing signs?
Sure. I was seeing a lot of depression, a lot in the spring, in the late spring and in the summer. We're seeing a lot of kids that were baking in too much time, you know, just having not enough structure in their lives. I'm seeing not so much less depression right now, but I'm seeing a lot of kids getting re-energized by having the responsibilities of school. But yeah, I think there is a lot of depression for teens with the uncertainty. And I think the more that teens can feel like they have future plans will really help them as well. So that up and empathizing. I'm sorry, I heard some background noise. And just empathizing with them that it is a really hard time. I keep coming back to that because parents tend to forget this. This is what I started to see at the beginning too. Parents, like within the first week of the pandemic, because of their own anxiety and need for control, which I get it, but coming up with this rigid study schedule to make sure that kids would maximize almost every minute of the day and be efficient. But you know, where this all went to, we're not allowed to go out, we're not allowed to, you know, at certain hours, it's limited at stores, and people are wearing masks, and hey, wearing masks is normal now. Like, I think we need to talk about what's going on and how we're all in this together, because I think when people feel depressed, particularly children and teens, they feel very alone.
Thank you very much. I do want to ask everyone if you can sign in, even if you didn't have questions. This helps us to show the interest, so we would be able to offer more programs. We'll also look at the other questions that were put in and see if we have some common topics that perhaps we can offer other nights like this for everyone. So we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And again, please look on the website for the handouts, and I can scroll through for that link and put that back in here for you. And let me get that right.
Yeah, I think if they, the handouts have a lot of what I discussed tonight, so I think it will help.
So there's that. And then also, just to remember, Dr. Bernstein, and these are some of the books that he has. So I want to thank you very much. Carol, I don't know if you had any parting thoughts or if we're good.
No, just another big thank you to Dr. Jeff's great presentation again. His relaxed and empathetic words should help everyone who has attended. Don't forget your questions, and look out for the next parent workshop. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thanks again,
me. Jeff.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.